Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Word of the Day. It's about that time. Today we want to examine whom God described as the humblest man on earth. This is the Deliverer, the life of Moses, part 2. Why should we read the Bible? Because it builds a firm foundation which leads us to having a relationship with God. There is a difference between the Word and the Scriptures. The Scriptures are God-inspired words given to man, compiled together and written in a book. But the Word is a person. The Word is Jesus. So when we study the Scriptures, it leads us to a relationship with Jesus. This is what the Word of the Day is all about, relationship. So let's get into the book. Now when we left Moses and the children of Israel, they had just exited out of Egypt by the strong hand of God. But they did not go empty. They spoiled Egypt. They went with resources, gold and silver. The Lord spoke to Moses after they left and said, "Consecrate," which means to set apart, "to me all the firstborn among the children of Israel, both man and beast. In this way, this is a form of tithe, for the first belongs to God." So Moses went to the people and instructed them and said, "Remember this day when you came out of the land of Egypt by the hand of the Lord. No one among you shall eat leavened bread," which means bread with yeast in it. "And when the Lord shall bring you into the land of the Canaanites and all the other inhabitants of that land, which he swore to your fathers to give to you, a land flowing with milk and with honey, very sweet. This you shall do in this month, which is called Aviv, A-V-I-V, every year. 7 days you shall eat bread without yeast, or unleavened bread. And on the 7th day shall be a feast unto the Lord. There shall no bread, unleavened bread. There shall be no bread with yeast in it, or unleavened bread, even in your possession. You shall tell your sons and daughters in that day and the generations to follow. This is done because of what the Lord did for us when he brought us out of the land of Egypt. It shall be a memorial to observe it. And it shall be when the Lord shall bring you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and to your forefathers. You are to give over to the Lord the first males of the womb. All the firstborn males of your livestock belong to the Lord. When your sons ask you, "Why do we do this?" you shall tell them, "By the strength of hand the Lord did bring us out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage, from slavery." When Pharaoh first let us go, God did not lead them through the land of the Philistines, which would have been easy and close by. God said perhaps the people will turn back when they see war. So the Lord led the people through the wilderness by the Red Sea. So the children of Israel journeyed. And Moses took the bones of Joseph, the former governor of Egypt, with them, for he had them swear during the time when he was living, and said, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry my bones away with you when you go." So Joseph had a vision of the future, knowing this would happen. Then they journeyed from Succoth and encamped in Etham at the edge of the wilderness. The Lord led them by day in a cloud shaped like a pillar to lead them. It was ever before them. And by night he led them by a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and by night. The pillar never left their sight. It was always right in front of them, so they knew exactly where they were going. This is Exodus 13. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the children of Israel that they turn and encamp before Pihahiroth, between Migdal and the sea, over against Baal Zephon, encamp there by the sea. For Pharaoh will say, of the children of Israel. They are lost in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. Yes, we're not finished with Pharaoh yet. For I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that he shall follow after you. And I will be honored by Pharaoh and all his hosts, that the Egyptians may know that I am God. So God hardened Pharaoh's heart one last time to show the king of Egypt who God truly is. It was told the king of Egypt by his people that the Hebrews fled out of Egypt, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants were turned against the people. And they said, "Why have we done this?" How quickly they forget. They said that we have let the Israelites go from serving us. So Pharaoh instructed his army and made ready his chariots, and he took his people with him. And he took 600, let me say that again, 600 chariots, all the chariots of Egypt, and the captains over every one of them rode in them. For the Lord hardened the heart of the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and he pursued after Israel. The Egyptians pursued after them, all the horses and the chariots of Pharaoh, and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea, by Paharath, before Baal-zephon. When Pharaoh was near, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes and saw the Egyptians marching after them. Have you ever seen an army marching across the desert? Their feet hitting the desert floor, kind of like thunder. In unison, all those soldiers, all those chariots, pursuing after the nation of Israel. When the Israelites saw them, they panicked and were sorely afraid. The children of Israel cried out to the Lord. The children of Israel cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, "Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you brought us here to die? You've taken us away to die in the wilderness. Why have you done this to us, to carry us out of Egypt? Isn't not this the word that we told you of in Egypt, saying, 'Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians'?" They wanted to continue to be slaves. For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than we should die in the wilderness. Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you this day. For the Egyptians whom you've seen today, you will not see no more. The Lord shall fight for us, and we shall have peace." So the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you coming to me? Tell the people to walk toward the sea. But lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Egypt shall be able to walk through on dry ground through the middle of the sea. I will then harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow you. I will then have honor from Pharaoh and from all the hosts and from his horsemen. The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." When God said that Pharaoh would honor him, he meant that this time Pharaoh would not return. This time Pharaoh is not coming back for vengeance. The pillar of the cloud, which was in front of their face, went and stood behind them, in between them and the Egyptians. Now, if I was the Pharaoh and I saw a great cloud move around the Israelites and stand in behind them, that would make me ponder. But no, not Pharaoh. So when the cloud went behind them, it was nighttime. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. It was a cloud of darkness to Egypt, for it was nighttime when it occurred. But it gave light by night to Israel. The light coming from behind pointed the way, so that one came not near the other. Moses stretches out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land. The waters divided. Now picture this. The children of Israel are walking on dry ground, and there's a wall of water on their right side and on their left. Now imagine walking through the middle of the sea on dry ground, and you look to your right, and there's a whale swimming by, and there are sharks swimming by. And you look to your left, there are all manner of fish and octopuses and all the life in the sea, and they're swimming and they're going by while you're walking through on dry ground. Now this is not a short distance. The sea reached out for miles and miles. So all the Israelites are walking through while the cloud of darkness is holding Egypt back. The area where the Israelites went in the sea was a downward slope, and then walking up again onto the other side. It wasn't just a straight level where they walked across. Consider when you go into the beach, and at a shallow end, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper until you arrive at the sea bottom, and then they took a gradual slope upward onto the other side of the beach. The place where the Israelites projected to have crossed goes on a downward slope and then levels out at the bottom, and then they gradually come up on the other side. The place where they went into the sea, in modern times is called Nueva Beach, and the place where they came out was called the Saudi Arabian site, or the Saudi Arabian beach. But it says as they walked into the sea, they went down into the great deep. So they went down a considerable amount of a ways, leveled out, and then came back up. So when God looked over and saw the Egyptians behind him trying to get past his pillar of fire, it had been hours that the Israelites has been walking. So they came, so God looked at the Egyptians in the morning watch. The morning watch is between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. When Israel went into the sea, it was still nighttime. So they walked for hours and got across. So then God eventually let up his fire, his divine fire, and the Egyptians pursued after them. So God let the Egyptians get all the way down into the bottom of the deep. And once Israel had gotten across, God spoke to Moses and said, "Stretch out your hands across the sea and let the sea close in on them." So that thousands and thousands of gallons of water came down upon the Egyptians. And I believe the Egyptians did not die from drowning. It was the thousands of pounds of sea that fell upon them. Have you ever watched scuba divers? When they dive, there's a certain part of the sea they can't go into, because if they go too deep, it will crush their bodies. So I believe the Egyptians were crushed before they drowned. And by that, you can see the miraculous hand of God that delivered the Israelites and brought an end to their captivity totally from the Egyptians. My God, my God, my God, when you consider the awesome power and the miracle that took place that day, and how God totally wiped out the entire army of Egypt in one fell swoop, you have to be in total awe of the power and the majesty and the presence of God. So the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and they saw them no more. And when Israel saw the Egyptians, they were dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great work which the Lord did against the Egyptians, and the people feared God. They reverenced him and believed the Lord and his prophet Moses. This is Exodus 14. Then Miriam, the prophetess, Moses' older sister, grabbed a tambourine, and she sang praises and danced before God, and all the women followed after her and sang and danced with her and did the same. And Miriam said this in her song, "The Lord reigns forever and ever." When Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought the waters of the sea back over them. But the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. What is interesting is that later in modern times, researchers went back to the Red Sea to investigate if there was really chariots under the sea. And what they found was a gold and silver plated wheel at the bottom of the sea that they recorded. They didn't disturb the wheel, but left it there because they said if they moved it, they might destroy it or it might disintegrate. So they left it there. There were other artifacts that were discovered at the bottom of the sea that were covered with coral that resembled the shape of chariot wheels and axles. When researchers visited the tomb walls in Egypt, there was a resemblance of the wheel that was at the bottom of the sea with a painting on the tomb wall near the date of the Exodus of Israel. Coral does not grow in a sandy area. It must have rock or something solid to attach itself to and grow on. That is why researchers believe that those formations at the bottom of the seas are the chariot wheels and the axles that the coral attached itself to, because the coral attaches itself to a solid object, and that's how it grows. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding water. That's a long time to not have anything to drink in the desert. When they came to Marah, a body of water, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. That is what Marah means, bitter. So the people grumbled and murmured against Moses. For like the nature of man, we soon forget what God has done for us. They said to Moses, "What are we to drink?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord. The Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and miraculously the water was fit to drink. There the Lord issued a ruling and instruction for them and put them to the test. He said, "If you listen carefully to the Lord your God, to do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commandments and keep all his decrees, I will bring on you none of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Then they came to Elim, where there was 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped there near the water. And this is Exodus 15. Israel journeyed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month, after their departing from the land of Egypt. Then the congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness because they had nothing to eat. It would have been better to die in Egypt when we sat by the flesh pots and when we did eat bread to the full. For you have brought us here in the wilderness to kill us all from hunger. This is Exodus 15. I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, in the evening you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. And you shall know that I am the Lord God. And it came to pass that in the evening quails came up and covered the camp. And in the morning a mist of dew lay round about the camp. And when the dew that lay around evaporated, behold, in the wilderness there lay a small round thing on the ground. When the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, is this manna? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, this is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. Another miracle. The Lord says, gather of it for every man according to how much he can eat. Only gather what you need and no more than that. They gather every man according to his eating. And Moses said, let no man leave any until the morning. But they didn't listen to Moses. But some of them left some of it until the morning. And it produced worms and started to stink. And Moses was very angry with them. They gathered manna every morning, every man according to his eating. And when the sun waxed hot, it melted. But on the sixth day they gathered twice as much bread for one man. And all the rulers, the elders of the congregation, came and told Moses. And Moses said, this is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is the rest, the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that what you need today, and save what you will need. And they laid it up until the morning, as Moses had spoken, and it did not stink, and there were no worms in it. And Moses said, eat that day, for that day is a Sabbath to the Lord. On the holy Sabbath there was no manna found in the fields today. Ye shall not find it in the field. 6 days ye shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be no work done. Still, there were still people that went out on the seventh day to gather, and they found nothing. The Lord said to Moses, how long refuse you to keep my commandments? So Moses said to the people, the Lord hath given you the Sabbath. Therefore he gives you on the sixth day twice as much bread. Abide you every man in his place. No one go out of his place on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day, and the house of Israel called the name thereof manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. And the children of Israel did eat manna 40 years until they came to a land that was inhabited. And they did eat manna until they came to the borders of the land of Canaan. This is Exodus 16. So now all Israel set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So again they quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. Moses replied, why are you arguing with me? Why do you not just ask God? But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, why did you bring us up out of the land of Egypt to make us and our children, our livestock, die of thirst? This is the issue with some people. where we complain and complain instead of going to God in prayer. You see, that is the thing. A lot of the time we complain and complain and complain instead of going to God in prayer. And that is why I believe God revealed this in His Word, that all we have to do is ask instead of complaining. But it takes a level of humility to ask. You see, because the people of God are His children. And if you had a child and they were starving and they were thirsty, and you are a just and loving Father, wouldn't you provide for their need? All they would have to do is ask. So likewise, with God, when you are in relationship with Him, your prayers avail much because you are His child. That is why in the Bible it says, because the Father hears His children. So God says, what am I going to do with these people? All they have to do is come to me and ask, and I will provide for their need. But the children of Israel back in biblical times just sat there complaining and arguing with Aaron and Moses. So Moses, time after time after time after time, would have to go back to God and tell God the situation. God would remedy the situation. Then Moses would go back and tell the people. Well, some might say, well, doesn't God know the situation? Why doesn't He just do it for them? Why do we have to come to Him in prayer? We need to understand that God has left the earth realm to man and allowed man to have control of the earth realm. He's not going to just force His will on mankind. You have to go and request from God, and then He has legal right to operate in the earth realm. That's why He needed a prophet to go to the people and tell the people so that He could deliver them. He couldn't just force His will on the people, because to force your will on someone is considered witchcraft, and God is not going to have any parts of that. He's a gentleman. He waits until you request it. God is after a relationship with His children. That is why He commands us to pray. So Moses cried out to the Lord, what am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me. And God answered Moses, go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile. I will stand there before you by the rock of Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink. So Moses did in the sight of the elders of Israel. Now this wasn't just a small amount of water that came out that rock when Moses struck the rock. It is said that the water that came out that rock was flowing like a river. So imagine all these people, hundreds and thousands of people that had to drink. So it had to mean a subsequent amount of water flowing from that rock. Through it you can see the awesome and mighty power of God. The rock is called Horeb because it's close to Mount Horeb, which is also Mount Sinai. He called the place Massa and Meribah because the Israelites quarreled and because they tested the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Really? Then later, the Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, choose some of the men and go out and fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on the top with the staff of God in my hands. So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning the war. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites started to win. When Moses' hands grew tired from him holding them up, then they took a stone and sat him upon it. And Aaron and Hur held up his hands on one side and on the other, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. And so Joshua overtook the Amalekite army with the sword. Now the Amalekites that the Israelites, led by Joshua, fought in the desert were the descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother. And Esau, the people, hated Israel, even though they were related to Israel. So that is why the Amalekites fought Israel. And that is why when Moses held up his hands, by holding up his hands, it's an act of submission, saying, Lord, you are in control. And when he held up his hands, Israel won. But when he lowered his hand, Israel struggled and was losing the battle. But every time Moses held up his hands as an act of submission to God, they won. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, and make sure that Joshua hears it, because I will completely blot out the name of the Amalekites from under heaven. I myself believe that Joshua needed to hear it, because Joshua is next in the line of succession of the man of God that will lead the nation of Israel. But that's a little later. After Israel defeated the Amalekites as an act of worship to God, Moses set up an altar to God in praises to him for what he had done. And this is the altar which Moses set up as an act of worship. Moses called the altar that he had set up Jehovah Nissi, or God is our banner. And interestingly enough, the altar is right next to Horeb, the rock that Moses struck when the water gushed out. So all these miracles are centered around Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb. And now when Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel his people, and that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt, then Jethro took his daughter Zipporah, Moses' wife, and his 2 sons, and after Moses had sent them back to him, with Moses' sons and his wife to Moses into the wilderness, where he encamped by the mount of God. He sent a word ahead of him to Moses to let him know that they were coming. And Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and he embraced him and kissed him, and they asked each other of their welfare. And they went into Moses' tent. And Moses told Jethro all that the Lord had done to the Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and how the Lord delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all other gods. Jethro took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came and all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses and his family. And then the next day Moses sat to judge the people, and his father-in-law was with him. And a long line of people stood waiting to speak to Moses from morning to evening. A long line of people. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he had to do for the people, he said, What is this thing that you do for the people? Why do you do this thing by yourself alone? And all the people stand by thee from morning until evening. Moses said to his father-in-law, Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a matter, they come to me, and I judge between one and the other. I make them know the statutes of God and his laws. Moses' father-in-law said to him, The thing that you are doing isn't good. You will eventually wear yourself out. You'll eventually burn out from this thing, for this thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to perform it by yourself. Listen now to my voice. I will give you counsel, and God shall be with you. Be like God toward the people. teach them ordinances and laws, and show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. You must appoint men such as that fear God, men of truth, those that hate covetousness, and place such over them, to be rulers of thousands, and rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens, and let them judge the people at all matters. And it shall be that every great matter they shall come to you, and let you judge the great matters. But the little matters they can judge, the rulers can judge for themselves. So shall it be easier for you, and they shall bear the burden with you. Go to God and ask if this is a just thing to do, and it will be easier for you. Then you won't have these long lines of people. Jethro revealed that even great men need wise counsel to advise them. For as much as we think we know, God gives insight to others to help us. So Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he said. And Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. They judged the people in all matters. The hard cases they brought to Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. And Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way into his own land. And this is Exodus 18. 3 months after departure out of Egypt, they went into the wilderness of Sinai. For they were departed from Rephidim, and they came to the desert of Sinai, and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mount. Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him out of the mountain, saying, You shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings and brought you to my mountain. Now, therefore, if you will obey my voice, indeed, and keep my statutes, then you shall be a peculiar treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. Moses then came and called for all the elders of the people, and laid before their faces all these words which the Lord commanded him. And the people answered together and said, All that the Lord has spoken, we will do. Moses returned back to the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, Lo, I come to thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak to you, and believe thee forever. Say, Go to the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes and be ready. And the third day, the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. Warn the people around the mount. Take heed to yourselves, that you go not up into the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever touches it shall surely be put to death. There shall be not an hand touch it, or he shall surely be stoned, or shot through. Whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet sounds a long time, they shall come up to the mount. Moses went down from the mount to the people and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. He said to the people, Be ready on the third day. Do not have sex with your wives. It came to pass on the third day in the morning there were thunderings and lightning and a thick cloud upon Mount Sinai, and the voice of the trumpet was exceedingly loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the rear part of the mount. Mount Sinai was altogether filled with smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in the fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a burning furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. When the voice of the trumpet sounded loud, and waxed louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him by a voice. The Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mount, and the Lord called to Moses out of the top of the mount, and Moses went up. The Lord said to Moses, "Go down, charge the people lest they break through to the Lord to gaze at me, and as a result many of them die. Let the priests also, which come near to the Lord, sanctify themselves, lest the Lord break forth upon them." Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come out to the Mount Sinai, for you charged us, saying, set bounds around the mount and sanctify it." The Lord said to him, "Away, go down, and you shall come up, you and Aaron with you. But let not the priests and the people come up to the Lord, lest they die." So Moses went down to the people and spoke to them. And this is Exodus 19. So when Moses went toward the Mount of God, God said, "I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other God before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow thyself down to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, are a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy to thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days shall you labor and do all thy work, but on the seventh day is the holy Sabbath unto the Lord your God. In it thou shalt not do any work, nor thy son, nor thy daughters, their maidservants, their menservants, their cattle, nor the stranger in their gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. So the Lord blessed the Sabbath, and hallowed it, or made it holy. Honor your mother and your father, that your days may be long upon the earth, which the Lord your God gives to you. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his oxen, nor his asses, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. And all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings, and the noise of the trumpet, and the mountains smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. They moved back. When the people spoke to Moses, "Speak thou with us, and we will listen. But let not God speak to us, lest we die." And Moses said to the people, "Fear not, for God is come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that you sin not." So not all fear is bad. It garners respect. It causes you to reverence true power. And the people stood afar off, and Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. And the people said to Moses, You shall say to the children of Israel, and the Lord said to Moses, you shall say to the children of Israel, you have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. You shall not make of any gods of silver or make gods of gold. An altar on the earth you shall make to me, and shall sacrifice thereon your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen, and all places where I record my name. I will come to thee, and I will bless you. If you will make me an altar of stone, you shall not build or shape stone out of it. For if thou lift up your tool upon it, you have polluted it. Neither shall you go up by steps to mine altar, that thy nakedness be not discovered thereon. Thank you for joining me today for the Deliverer, the Life of Moses, Part 2. Please join me again next time for the wilderness experience, when we continue with the nation of Israel and the life of the great prophet Moses. Thank you for taking this time with me as we walk through the scriptures. I pray that it has been a benefit to you and inspires you to read the Word of God for yourself if you're not engaged already. 2 Timothy 2:15 says, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. This is the word of the day, and I am Pastor Michele Parks. Please like and share, and by all means subscribe to my channel. I look forward to seeing you again next time. I pray that the Lord Most High will bless us all with the spirit of wisdom and understanding and the knowledge of Him. Blessings and shalom until next time.